This is Mental Selling, the sales podcast for people who are dedicated to making a difference in customers' lives. We're here to help you unlock sales talent, win more relationships, and transform your business with integrity. I'm your host, Haley Parr. Let's get right into it. Welcome back to the Mental Selling podcast, brought to you by Integrity Solutions. I'm Haley Parr, and today we're talking about the untapped potential sitting inside your clinical teams. Clinical specialists walk into accounts every single day with something most salespeople spend years trying to earn: trust. They're already in the room. They're already credible, already having conversations. So the question isn't whether that influence exists. It's whether it's being used strategically. This is part 2 of a conversation with Amanda Ervin, Senior Learning and Performance Consultant at Integrity Solutions, and Michelle Dillon, a healthcare industry veteran with over 24 years in sales, clinical, and training roles. If you caught part 1, we laid the mindset foundation, including the reframe that turns service versus sales into service through sales, and the 4 traits that separate a trusted clinical presence from a genuine strategic influencer. If this is your first stop, you'll be right at home. So in today's episode, we get into the practical layer. How do clinical specialists actually earn the right to influence? Amanda walks through a 4-lane questioning framework, and Michelle closes with 5 concrete moves you can bring to your team this week. Let's get into it.
Our clinical teams, our clinical specialists, those support people, those service, those training and education people oftentimes are put to the side of sales, right? And it's like sales does sales and you do the service portion. And we say, The highest, most functioning teams out there are ones that work together collaboratively and strategically. A good example of this is I had heard in the news Kyle Busch had passed away, a famous NASCAR driver, champion in the NASCAR series for many, many years. And I had watched NASCAR years and years and years ago, hadn't watched it in a while. And so I actually tuned into the most recent race. They were going to be honoring him, and I just wanted to tune in. And I had forgotten some really important components of racing. And that is that they work as a team. They work as a team and they strategize together. And a lot of the strategy is happening before the big race, right? As they're starting to think about the race and strategizing against it and making decisions together. Then they actually start the race, and that race car driver's out there. They're the big face, the big name, the sellers, AKA, are out there, right? And people see them and think of them when they think of that car. But what we oftentimes forget, and what I was reminded in watching it, is all of the decisions that are made back and forth between the driver and the pit crew during the race as they're making their way to the finish line, right? As they're stopping and they're making decisions about what tires and when to put tires on. There's a guy that does these wing adjustments that literally is making sure the aerodynamics of the car are aligned in mid-race, right? Making those decisions and talking back and forth with that driver. That is the type of strategic team we need, and that's the place we need our clinical specialists to play in this strategic sales role. When we think of the importance of this, it's because this statistic is not new to anyone here on this call. We know it's harder to get into our accounts and to see our providers. We know that it's dropped significantly. Statistics vary all over the place, but about 75% decline in being able to get that time with our clients and providers. The ones that we do, we're darn lucky because they've also condensed the amount of people that they're willing to talk to and engage with. And why is that? It is because statistically, when we ask those providers and those clinical folks why they're not meeting with people, it's because they say they're not bringing me value. So, clinical specialists, you do have trust. You do have credibility in the accounts. You do have connections and you do support in service. Are we providing the value that we think we're providing? Right? Because 27% of our providers are still saying, I'm not being met. Can we utilize that trust, credibility, and connection that those folks have to start adding more value and complementing the value that our sales folks can bring? Again, thinking of it more as a strategic team instead of the one racer out there out front and everybody else just supporting them. Because when that racer finishes and the checkered flag is thrown, it's the entire pit crew and that driver that celebrate, that pop the champagne, that go crazy because every single one of them was integral in the success of that driver.
Let's sit with that stat for a second. A 75% decline in provider access. Decision makers actively choosing not to meet with reps because they don't see the value in it. That sounds less like a pipeline or prospecting problem and more of a value problem. And it's getting harder and harder to solve through traditional sales channels alone. But here's the other side of that stat. Clinical specialists are still getting in. They still have access that the sales reps are losing. And they have it because they've earned something that can't be faked, can't be fast tracked, and that's that genuine trust. The question Amanda is raising isn't whether that trust exists. It's whether the people who have it know how to use it strategically. And that's where most organizations are leaving money on the table. They've invested in the relationship. They've put credentialed, knowledgeable, caring people inside these accounts. And then they let those people operate almost entirely in reactive mode, responding to what's asked, solving the problem right in front of them, and then moving on. No pre-case planning, no diagnostic dialogue, no intentional effort to understand the account at a deeper level and feed that back into the team's strategy. Let's unpack that NASCAR analogy that Amanda mentioned. The pit crew doesn't just hand over tires and step back. They're in constant communication with the driver. They're reading what's happening on the track in real time, making adjustments, feeding information back into the driver's strategy. That's the role clinical specialists can play if they're developed to do it and given the structure to make it happen. Which brings us to the real unlock. Clinical specialists walk in with product knowledge and rapport already in their pocket. But the ones who move from valued resource to genuine change agent have learned one additional thing: how to ask the right questions and how to sit in the discomfort of not jumping straight to the answer. That's exactly what Amanda gets into next.
So I want to talk a little bit about how we can be strategic with our clinical specialists and how we can skill them up, changing the mindset of what we want them to do when we get in there and add strategic value. Questioning is a skill set that we oftentimes will train sellers in, right? We train them how to ask very strategic and consultative questions. How much are we developing our clinical specialists in their capabilities of asking strategic consultative questions? Because influence does not start with knowing all of the answers. I don't need someone to walk in my door and tell me all the things that they say I'm doing wrong and all the things that they can fix and all the products and services that if we were just doing it that way, it would be better. What I need them to do is ask me questions to understand why we're doing it the way we're doing it now, what we want better, and how they can help me. I need someone to know me like I know me. I need someone who knows my clinic like I know my clinic. I want someone to know my patients like I know them. And then they earn the right to offer strategic solutions, advice, suggestions, and ideas. Folks, we have to just flip the script here and earn influence by changing the conversation that our clinical specialists are having there in the OR, because true credibility is not knowing your stuff. True credibility is earned by knowing their stuff as much as you know your stuff. And you earn the right to be an influencer. Our clinical specialists should be developed in their ability to ask questions that are open-ended and strategic. Questions that require thinking. Because when I ask clinical folks, hey, are you asking questions in there? They're like, oh, yeah, I ask questions all the time. I ask how many do they use? How many do they need? What gauge they have? What instrument they use? What. And I say, well, why do you ask those questions? Because I need to know what product to show or what products to bring. I need to know what things to bring to show you, to help you, to sell you, if you will, right? That's not consultative or diagnostic questioning. That's not going to help you learn, like I know my business, my clients, my patients, my OR, my issues, problems, and concerns, like I know them. Diagnosis or diagnoses focused questions do, they get to not fixing symptoms, they get to the root cause, right? And when you think of great practitioners in the medical field, they are the ones that are not fixing symptoms, but they're deeply consulting their patients to understand where that's coming from so that they fix not just what the patient wants fixed, they fix what the patient needs fixed. That's what we're asking our clinical specialists to do. Help them in a way, not just the way they want, but the way they really need in order to achieve their goals, outcomes, and desires. Here's a quick and easy way that when I am working with folks in these clinical roles, I help them think about conversations. When you are in a meaningful conversation or you have an opportunity to spark a meaningful conversation in front of your key audience, client, clinic, walk them through these 4 lanes of questioning to help you understand it like they know it and earn the right to potentially have some influence in there around a solution. Here's what they are. First, understand what the reality is now, right? What's it look like now? What's it feel like now? What's going on now? What works well? What doesn't work well as it relates to a certain area, topic, or concern? Then understand how that's going, right? What issues are arising because it goes that way? What impact is the way that you're doing it now having on the patient, the clinic, the outcomes, right? Where are you now and how's that going for you? That's what you need to understand, right? In order to earn the right to start getting some influence in there. Now that we know where they're at right now, I need to know how far away that is from where they want to be, right? So I have to ask questions like, all right, well, if you're doing it this way now and it's having this impact and it's working this way, what do you want it to look like? What would you like it to do? How would great look like? Why does that matter? Why do we want to get there? What's that going to impact? What's that going to do? If you're doing it this way and you're having these issues and you want it to look like this, what are we hoping that gains gives you, helps you with, right? Boiled down to its simplest form, because I'm an easy button kind of girl. Where are you now? How's that going for you? All right, where do you want to be? And why do you want to be there? That's consultative, strategic questioning. Sounds easy. Seems easy. Sure. Our clinical folks will just do that. I'll just give them this framework and they'll do that. Here's the trouble. Clinical specialists are helpers. They want to fix things because they have good hearts. They are knowledgeable, deeply knowledgeable, oftentimes about procedures, patients, medicine, products, specs, all of that. They're deeply knowledgeable, and they oftentimes have the curse of knowledge, which means that when they're in those situations, they don't think they need to ask those questions because they know the answers. Oh, I saw your sterilization process and I've already identified bottlenecks in it. And here's how we can help you fix it. Or here's some things you should be thinking about, right? And I say, you may think you know the problem, but do you know it like they know it? And walking someone through this line of questioning makes them think deeply about things they may not have thought about before. They may just do it that way because that's the way they do it. But when you start consultatively asking questions, You help them verbalize and think through, hey, there may be issues I'm not even thinking about. Again, this is diagnostic questioning, not solving for symptoms, but solving for a root cause that can at times be invisible to the person that they're inflicted on, right? We don't always know where the root cause comes in, but that's where we can have that influence as clinical specialists because we can help them get there. Let me give you a very quick example of what this may sound like. For instance, sterilization, right? I may say, hey, you know what? I saw some bottlenecks, but I'm not going to say that. What I'm going to say is, hey, I would love to understand a little bit more about your sterilization process, right? Once an instrument leaves the room, walk me through what that looks like. I understand it from their perspective. Okay, so tell me, are there any issues, risks, problems, concerns about that, or any sticking points, bottlenecks that you're experiencing? I saw some, but I'm going to ask them, right? And if they say no, I will ask an insightful question around interesting. Okay, well, one thing that I had seen was XYZ. What are your thoughts about that causing some bottlenecks, right? And I'm asking them to tell me. And once I get that and I understand that, I may say, okay, well, you know what, Michelle, if you could wave a magic wand and just fix this place tomorrow, what would you do differently? What would it look like? What would it feel like? What would that sterilization process look like to be more efficient? If we could make some of those fixes, if that magic wand existed, what would that impact? How do you think that would impact the patient, the clinic, the outcomes? And having someone think through and verbalize it, even though you think you already know the answer, number one, validates it. Number two, helps people realize that these exist, even though they hadn't thought of it. And number three, may bring to light issues, problems, concerns you didn't even know existed. And because you have trust, clinical specialists, because you have credibility, you can ask these questions and you can start in these diagnostic dialogues. We want our clinical specialists to think about every opportunity to get in front of people in those clinics and medical spaces as an opportunity to compound their learning. What can I learn? What can I gain about where they're at now, what their risks are, where they want to be, and why they want to get there? Because all of that information becomes strategy for us as a sales strategic team, helping to add value to our clients and customers. Michelle Dillon uses this word. I stole it. I told her I had to give her credit just one time and then I was going to steal it for myself, but I love it. She says, get forensic in these teams, right? Get granular about what's going on. We should be doing pre-case planning, especially opportunities when we don't often get in there. Post-case reviews, right? Again, what are we planning on? What's our goal? And then how did it go? What did we learn? What did we gain? Again, value is in the eye of the beholder. Are we really bringing value to our clients? And would they say we're adding value? Because statistics say, no, we're not adding as much value as we think we're adding. So to add real value, you go in there with a plan, a purpose. You ask questions to understand, not ask questions to win, not ask questions to sell, but you ask questions that deepen your understanding and allow you to be a strategic resource for them. What we encourage you to do is build these strategic sales teams that are comfortable, confident, and consistent in running these pre-case reviews, planning sessions, post-call reviews as teams, right? And start to make this part of our process in just the way we work here at your organization, increasing the communication, increasing the strategy, and increasing the impact and value that we can bring to clients. I want to pass it back to Michelle as we look to succinctly kind of wrap this into some takeaways that you can execute and do when you go back to your teams in your organization. Michelle, I'm going to toss it to you.
Thank you, Amanda. Oh, gosh, I was taking notes. Let's talk about some 5 moves to embed strategic influence into your clinical support workflows. Number 1, redefining selling. And that really has to go on between the ears, as Amanda mentioned. I am is the most influential phrase that you can use. I am a seller. I am a helper. I am going to achieve my goal today. So in your redefinition, start with yourself and then you can share. Number two, you're going to activate those 4 traits of influence and success by writing down your goals, by sharing that, by understanding where do you need to improve with your emotional intelligence or social intelligence, and then also assessing what is your achievement drive today. You're going to build that skill set by creating a compelling scoreboard for yourself, surrounding yourself with others that are also trying to achieve goals. And then also in terms of joint team clinical planning, maybe your goal is to just share information with your sales representative. Curiosity is great, but it cannot exist in a silo. So when you do ask those questions, make sure that you're sharing or asking your team to share with the team so that you can help the patient, so that you can approach the why. And if you've noticed, and if you got forensic in this moment, you saw that there wasn't a number 5. So I'm adding the number 5 right now to say, in terms of getting forensic, that takes time and it takes reflection. So please, as you're thinking about anything that you wrote down today, use it again and again and again. This is an ask. Get forensic with your own assessment of where you are, and you will slowly but surely start to influence for good. You will see your teams influencing for good. And then in the end, you know that you are successful in moving towards not just trust, but trust and influence. Amanda, back over to you.
I love that. I love that. I often, when talking to you, Michelle, you often issue a challenge, right? And you say, no, I want you to be specific. If I'm being too vague, right? You say, no, get specific. What are some ways that get specific over the next, 30 days of building out these things here on the screen with their clinical teams?
I love that question, Amanda. I can get very specific and very simply, and I'll just hold up my number 5, the 5 whys. If you ask yourself why 5 times in any situation, you are going to get forensic. And that can be useful, whether it's a conversation or using technology or anything that went wrong. Use the 5 whys to be able to get specific. And you'll answer a lot of the questions that perhaps that were unanswered before you reflected in that way.
I love that. When you are thinking about skilling up these clinical influencers and developing them in these areas, how much of this would you say, Michelle, you've done this for 30 years, how much of this would be formalized training potentially versus coaching, development? Like, what are some ideas and thoughts you have on that?
You have to have a healthy dose of, I always say both can be true. And I think training is absolutely part of it. It may be a lesser part in terms of understanding, but experiential situations, coaching are key. You need to have some chin lifters around you, as I say, because you have to have a lot of courage to do something different. And the reinforcement that a coach can help with is, hey, this is what you did well. I talk about feedback, immediate feedback that's actionable. A like wonder approach. I like that you did this. I like that you did that. I wonder if you would try this differently. And that gives your clinicals the baseline to say, hey, thank you for sharing that information. I'm going to try that again. And we want things to be replicated. We want it to be sustained. And the way to do that is with positive reinforcement. And that's where coaching comes in.
I love that. I love that. And I am a huge proponent of coaching. I call it the force multiplier of anything you do, right? So if you have formalized training for your clinical specialists, are your leaders trained up to coach to that, right? Coaching to a skill, coaching to potential, building them bigger and greater than they thought they could. Right. And especially when we're changing mindset and we're asking them to expand their belief boundaries, coaching and continuous support is an incredible resource. And like I said, force multiplier of that. We have a program called Integrity Selling that's oftentimes used for sellers in the sales, med device space, clinical spaces, hospitals, pharma. And you would be surprised at how many clinical specialists go through that exact same course, because if they're going to be influencers in this, strategic sales team, I want to know what my sellers out there doing, saying, so I can complement it in these conversations that I'm having as well, right? And again, I need to shift my mindset around what selling really is. So I think making sure that you have a formalized plan to develop very specific skills in your clinical folks, plus a plan to support, coach, and reinforce afterwards are going to be two things that you will see monumental change, monumental behavior change, and impact in accounts once we start to do that really, really well. I would agree with that.
The access problem Amanda and Michelle described isn't going away. But the teams that figure out how to activate trust, already sitting inside their clinical relationships, and build the questioning skills to turn that trust into strategic dialogue, those are the teams. Those are the ones who won't feel that access problem quite as sharply. What stood out to me in this conversation is just how practical all of this really is. The mindset reframe, the 4 traits, the 4 lanes of questioning, the 5 moves, none of this requires a complete overhaul of how your team operates. What it does require, though, is intention, a pre-case plan, a better question or line of questioning, a coaching conversation you may have been putting off. And that's the challenge Amanda and Michelle are issuing here. Don't wait for a formal training rollout to start. Pick one thing today. One question you'll ask differently, one goal you'll write down. Do it right now. One clinical specialist you'll coach this week. Just pick one, start there. Because the teams that are winning right now aren't necessarily the ones with the biggest budgets or the most advanced tools. They're the ones where every person on the team understands their role in the outcome and shows up with the skills and the mindset to play it. I'm Haley Parr. Thank you so much for listening to the Mental Selling Podcast. If today's episode resonated with you, part 1 or part 2, share it with someone on your team and connect with Integrity Solutions on LinkedIn for more. And of course, you can also listen to part 1 of this episode wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're looking for a way to accelerate sales performance this year, we invite you to build your sales performance roadmap, aligned to your goals and designed to close skill gaps, strengthen customer trust, and deliver measurable growth. To learn more or get started, visit integritysolutions.com. Thank you for joining us on Mental Selling. If today's conversation resonated with you, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your network. For more insights on how to go beyond winning deals and build real customer relationships, visit integritysolutions.com. See you next time.